Who is Jesus? Jesus was a messenger from the monad who reminded us that there's a divine spark in us. And how you activate the divine spark is by focusing on Jesus and repeating his words. Jesus was like Zarathustra, like Plato, like Homer, like the Yahwehs, a poet prophet. And so if you just repeated his sayings, if you repeated his poetry, then you could activate that spark within you and you could glow. Okay? And this explains why he became so popular. It also explains to us why the Romans had to kill him. Because at this time, the Roman Empire, the main currency, the main economy is based on slavery. Most people were slaves. If they were not slaves, they were poor. And here's Jesus, who's come to remind you that you don't have to be a slave. You are free to do whatever you want. There's a higher power than the Roman Empire, and it is the divine. It is the universe. And so people start to defy their masters. And they were no longer afraid of death. And this is why the Romans had to kill Jesus, because Jesus was stealing from them, right? Slaves are property. If you let slaves run away, if you free slaves, that destroys the wealth of the Romans. Remember that Jesus, when he was killed along with two thieves. He was crucified. And so Jesus was killed because he was a thief. He was stealing from the Romans. Now the question then is, okay, how do we get from Jesus to the Catholic Church? Jesus teaches us that we are free to believe whatever we want, that we just listen to our hearts. We will be in touch with the monad again, and we have nothing to fear. The Catholic Church, the church teaches us that you believe in Jesus, and that's all you have to do in order to achieve redemption and salvation. Jesus came to die for our sins, so therefore we are now slaves to Jesus. These are two opposite ideas. Okay? The reason why is the idea of the divine spark is the greatest threat to the Roman Empire. So the Romans had to somehow imprison the spark and make it an economic commodity. Okay? And so that's why they created the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church is a prison in order to control that divine spark, to hide it from you. And the main architect of the Catholic Church his name is Paul. Okay? And most people agree that Paul and not Jesus is the real founder of Christianity. So let's discuss Paul. So Paul has a very interesting background. He is a Jew, but he grew up in Greek culture. He was very well educated. He was very wealthy. And so we say he's a Hellenized Jew. And he was probably working for the Roman Empire as a spy or an agent. Now, in that time, your education was mainly in rhetoric. Okay? Or the word we use for this is sophistry. So let me explain to you who the sophists were, because they're very important. So back in classical Athens, there's a major debate between Socrates, a philosopher, as well as a sophist. Okay? Philosophy. So what's interesting is that they both come from the same word, which is Sophia, which is Greek for knowledge. The philosophers are people who love knowledge. What they believe is that there is an eternal truth, and that we must try to achieve this eternal truth, right? Remember Plato's allegory of the cave, how you escape from the cave and into the light. Okay, that's what philosophy is trying to do, trying to help you liberate yourself into the light. Sophists believe something else. Sophists believe that eternal truth does not exist. Why? Because words are reality. Philosophers believe that words are an illusion, but sophists believe that words are a reality unto themselves. And so what's important is to learn how to master language in order to construct reality. Okay? So Sophist gives us the word sophistry, which is basically trickery. Okay? So, in order to defeat the threat of the divine spark, what Paul does is he pulls a trick, and it's the greatest trick ever. The trick is this. Jesus says, listen to my words, and you will find the divine spark in you. What Paul says is, believe in Jesus, and you'll be saved. Okay? So he changes the focus from the words of Jesus to the person of Jesus himself. All right? And so what Paul's going to do is he's going to construct a new religion called Christianity by synthesizing the three major cultures of that time. The Roman culture, the Greek culture, and the Jewish culture. Okay? So remember, the Jewish culture is the Bible. And what Paul tells us is that Jesus is the promised Messiah. At this time in history, the Bible is heavily influenced by the Persians, right? Remember, the Persians were monotheists. They believed in good and evil, the Asher and the Druze, okay? And so the Bible began to reflect the Persian belief, especially in the idea of eschatology, the end of the world. And what Jews believed is they're not afraid of the Romans, because eventually the Messiah will return, or sorry, not return, the Messiah will come to lead them to war against the Romans, and because the Messiah is anointed by God, they will triumph, okay? So the Jews are waiting for the Messiah of war in order for them to reclaim the Davidic kingdom, okay? The kingdom of David. What Paul does that's very clever is that he uses this eschatology, but he says that Jesus is not the Messiah of war, he's the Messiah of peace, okay? And therefore, we Jews should not resist the Romans, okay? So that's the first major culture that Paul uses. The second major culture that Paul uses is the Greek culture. So the Greeks have something called the mystery schools. And these are just cults. And it's important you know these mystery schools because they will become the basis of secret societies today. And in these mystery schools, there's lots of different ones, but Paul chooses a mystery school that worships Dionysus. Okay, Dionysus is the Greek god of creativity, wine. And the story of Dionysus is he is born of a virgin mother. His father is Zeus. And then Dionysus is killed by the enemies of Zeus, and Zeus finds him and resurrects him. Okay? This is important because this becomes the story of Jesus. And how the people worship Dionysus is they have a ritual meal where they actually believe they're eating the body of Dionysus and they are absorbing his energy. And they're becoming one with Dionysus. They're coming communion with Dionysus. And the Christians have the same ritual, okay? And this is what's called the Eucharist, Thanksgiving, or communion. Okay? And all Christians practice this today. Okay? So that's the second major culture. The third major culture, that is the most important, of course, is the Roman culture. So the Roman social structure is called the pater familias. Okay? And how the system works is at the very top, there's one patriarch. This is where we get the word patriarchy, right? And then he has lots of children, right? Sons. And also he has slaves as well. So it's a very top-down system, right? The patriarch's at the very top. In this system, the patriarch is always right. He is God. here you have slaves. Now what the patriarch will do is he will identify very promising slaves with talent, and will turn them into clients. So clients are just business people. So he frees the slaves and they become his clients. So now they're able to conduct business on his behalf. And in this way, he will create a business empire, okay? So this is the idea of the Roman Empire. So rather than just one system, the Roman Empire is actually a system, a platform where dozens of families control the empire together. And what happens is these families control a particular province, okay? So it's more like a franchise model rather than a strict hierarchy. This is important because Paul will take the system, and from the system, he will copy it to create the church. All right? So the church is exactly the same as a paterfamilias, where at the very top, you have a person, a bishop, and then he might have some cardinals, but then everyone else is just followers, okay? Or disciples. So it mirrors the system. This is important because now what you can do is you can easily switch from the current system to the new system devised by Paul. Now, why would the Romans want to do this? Because if you think about it, this is the perfect solution to the problem of Jesus. As a patriarch, your main concern is getting your slaves to work hard, right? You want to suck the energy out of them. But now with Jesus, slaves are like, why should I work for you? Paul solves this problem by saying, oh, follow Jesus and you'll be saved, okay? So in this way, what happens is Paul's formulation of Jesus causes slaves to work even harder, right? Because the idea is before you have to work in order to stay alive. Now they work in order to go to heaven for all of eternity, right? So the deal now is work as a slave for a few decades, but then you can enjoy an eternity of joy in paradise. Pretty good deal, right? And so this causes the slaves to be more obedient and to work harder. Okay? Also, what's more important is now the patriarch switches from a king to a god, right? His private wealth now becomes spiritual authority. Not only that, but because he has spiritual authority, he can expand more rapidly outwards, okay? So before, to get slaves, you have to buy slaves. Now, you just have to convert people into your religion. So it's a much faster way to create wealth. And this is important because what you'll learn next class is this is a system that the Romans will use to take over the barbarians, okay? So next class you'll learn about the barbarian invasions, basically the Goths, and how because of the system, they were now able to assimilate these barbarians into the culture and maintain a social hierarchy. Okay? And so, in other words, Jesus was talking to slaves, but Paul was talking to patriarchs. And so, these patriarchs would convert, and when they convert, they took the entire system with them. That explains the rapid growth of Christianity. Okay? Also, what's important is the religion that the patriarchs practice is not the one that the slaves practice. The slaves practice Christianity, but the patriarchs practice the mystery cults, okay? Why? Because this is the way that the patriarchs work together, and this becomes a basis for secret societies. So, while the ordinary person worships a new religion called Christianity, the patriarchs themselves, in secret, still practice their Greek mystery cults. And this is a system that we still have even today. All right? Okay. So, this system now is able to spread really quickly because, as you can see from the system, those who convert are more advantaged than those who do not convert. At this time in history, most do not convert, but those who convert are able to see more rapid wealth generation, they're able to see more power generation, and they're able to expand much faster. And so this is a secret of Christianity. Okay?